dare say, old Bean. Fantastic set. Quite smart.
My esteemed manager.
Have you given any more thought to our little plan?
Alistair St. Barnaby Bixby Jones.
Busy? Well, I needn't remind you, it's a real cooker/corker. Rock with strings. Just you.
Poor Alistair. He's been trying to get me to make a jazz with strings album for years.
Real Templar gasser. Now, we should strike whilst the breath.
Hey, lover. Wardell and I got a split.
You got another gig?
Yeah, baby. Another gig, last minute.
Taking my sax player.
Oh, well, it's a money gig. You dig?
You know I don't dig those money gigs. It's a big money gig, boy. Just a gig kind of gig.
Oh, it's a big money gig, all right. Real big. Biggity big, big, big. You dig?
I don't really dig, but I dig. You dig?
Yeah, I dig. I'm so glad that you dig.
Coming back.
Not tonight, lover.
Take this 20. It's something real good tonight.
Keep it, Rock. I don't need the cash. I'll dig you later.
Later, lover.
Hello. All right. That's a lovely blazer you're wearing there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was my favorite jacket of the many rainbow-colored suits I get to wear.
How did that one come out? Is that a situation where you have a costume designer who pulls out a wardrobe and you get to play and choose, or did they know that they wanted this designed?
We had an amazing costume designer on this, and yeah, she got to go through the Universal Vault, I believe, which has, I mean, I think that's most of the things that we're wearing, or many of them at least, are from like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, like old vintage outfits, which ended up being really fun.
Like
and,
little did you know, like a big star from the 50s could have been wearing that jacket.
Who knows?
In some movie.
You know, I was doing a Drunk History episode with Michael Cera earlier this year, and we were doing something from the 1920s, I think, and his jacket had a big hole in it and like a dark brown stain in the back. And we were like, wow, either someone just had a squib or something in a Western, or somebody actually died in this jacket 100 years ago. So similar situation here.
When did you decide that you wanted to start doing more comedies? You know, like as a young actor, you did AI, you did Sixth Sense, kind of serious movies. When was it kind of like, you know, you have the Entourage movie now, like you said, you have Drunk History, you're doing Spoils Before Dying, you had the Kevin Smith film, which is a sort of horror comedy. Yeah. Like, how did you start getting involved in comedy?
Well, I think it's a combination of just some really good luck, because something like Sex Ed is a film we were trying to develop since like 2010, and it just happened to come out in the middle of all these more recent projects that I've had. And then I think just mainly it's a really great time for comedy. You know, a series like this can find a home, you know, on a place like IFC. And then, you know, I was on a show for Amazon called Alpha House, and just there's so many outlets and places where these shows can find a home, and it just gives you a lot more opportunities as an actor to pursue these really sort of specific projects.
Do you find doing comedy is different than sort of what you cut your chops on? I
guess in a way. I mean, there's a you know, the improvisation that we sometimes get to do on something like this is a new element, and also. But you know, in another way, like in Tusk, which has this very fantastic plot, or a guy is turning into a walrus and everything, and me and Genesis Rodriguez, who were sort of on the searching for Justin Long and everything, we found a lot of the comedy in just playing it very straight. So in some ways, there's a lot of different requirements and different things that you do to find the comedy, but in other ways, like. The same as in a drama, you're just trying to make it as real as possible. And in something like this, if we're playing it very sincere and very genuine, I think you get a lot more comedy out of it that way.
So you're improvising a little bit in this?
Somewhat. In Spoils like that, there's a lot of voiceover, and the plot is pretty complicated, so it's all
shocking how complicated the plot is, and how mechanic it is, and how quickly it moves.
Yeah, and we're dealing with this kind of meta-reality, because Will Ferrell's character... the author who wrote the miniseries, and then he filmed it himself. It adds this other layer to it. And in season 1, we actually came up with characters for the actors in the 70s that performed in the project and everything. So there's that. I think my guy was a Dennis Hopper type character named Marty Comanche, and we did all this crazy 8mm behind the scenes footage with Funny or Die, and there was a lot of improvisation with that. And then, you know, there's some like commercials that John Ross just shoehorned into the miniseries. So our director, Matt Piedmont, who also co-wrote it, will be like, all right, you know, Haley and Kristen, go over and play with, you know, those biscuits. Talk about how great the biscuits are, and we'll go do something weird over there. So that's the sort of improvisation that would come out with it.
So personally, as a huge Dennis Hopper fan, you know, what did you do for research to do some 70s era Hopper? Did you go watch like the, what's that documentary that's made about him, The Great American Hero?
When he was making the last movie in Peru or whatever. Yeah, that was really the era.
I can't remember the name of that documentary. If you have not seen, I think it's on YouTube. If you haven't seen this documentary about Dennis Hopper in the 1970s trying to make this movie on all the drugs you could possibly be on while trying to make a movie, you have to go watch it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So that was actually just improvised because the first day I went to set on the first season, I hadn't met anybody yet. And went up to Matt Piedmont, and he was like, all right, so everybody's coming up with a character today. Like, just pick like a person. So that was the first thing that came to mind. And what helped is that I had been shooting a film called The World Made Straight in early 2013, where I had a big beard and really long hair. And it took place in the 70s in Appalachia. And I texted Matt when I was shooting that going, like, you know, I know the first season spans like 40 years. I have a lot of beard right now, you know, if we're shooting that stuff first, maybe we can play with that and then shave it down as we go. He's like, yeah, do it. So I grew this beard for like 4 months and then came to set on the first day. And first thing he tells me is to come up with another character. And then he goes, we're actually doing the 60s stuff first, so you got to shave it all off and wear fake hair, which ended up being great in its own way. But just that was my only opportunity to sort of act with the beard. So I was like, who would do this? Who would wear a denim vest and talk a lot about the desert and stuff like that? So that was pretty fun.
So do you get nervous when you're improvising with people like Maya Rudolph or Kristen Wiig who have, you know, come from an improvisational background? Does that like, do you feel like, oh, I'm not going to be able to say something as funny as they are? Do you even try, or do you just try to maintain the scene?
I mean, maybe beforehand I was a little bit nervous because I hadn't really met anybody before and didn't know quite what to expect. But it's truly the mark of, you know, masters of improvisation and that sort of comedy, in that you feel really comfortable around them, and that people like Maya and Kristen are so good that they make everybody around them better too. And you just you're not feeling like you have to, you know, come up with this or that. It's just, it really flows. It feels natural, and there's just a sense of fun. Like, I have so much fun doing scenes with Kristen, who luckily I had a lot of work with, particularly in the first season. So yeah, that's you know, just one of the examples of how great they are at what they do.
Were you nervous at all working with Omar?
I was excited. I was a huge fan. And as it was with The Sopranos with me, The Wire was a sort of show where you look for people and your friends or maybe a girlfriend that hasn't seen it yet so you can rewatch it vicariously 100%. Through them. So I had just done that with The Wire.
Or someone who doesn't like it, so you can just sort of dump them as a friend and have like a smaller crew.
Yeah, well, and I think I just saw on HBO, didn't they like remaster it in HD? So maybe that's another opportunity to go through it again. But yeah, I mean, Michael has had the most amazing life and has done so many amazing things in different categories. He had this whole career as a dancer, and I think he worked with Tupac for a time, and yeah, just a really awesome guy to work with.
Did you have trouble not fanboy? I mean, if I was working with Michael Kenneth Williams on a daily basis, I would have moments where I was like, cheese stands alone. Like, you know, I'd have to say something from The Wire.
With a certain line that's been associated with me, I've always found it easy to not not do that with other people.
Why is that?
Just, you know, just you sort of know how it feels.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I think last time I interviewed you, I was forced by a comment to bring that line up too, and I was like, man, he's not going to be pumped about this. He's heard this too much.
It doesn't bother me, but just like I guess I just like, just with other actors, like I've you know, it's just never been my way of thing. I think it's more like with musicians, there's more of a starstruckness. But like on a set like this, I'm a huge fan of his, was a huge fan of Kristen's and everybody, but just immediately you're thrown into this environment where you have to work creatively with someone, and you just instantly become very comfortable with them, because all of them, to a one, are just so welcoming and generous with what they do.
What's the speed at which you're shooting something like this? I mean, it looks great. You guys are funny, but it's an IFC show. It's a period piece in its own way, so there's a little bit of money involved. So I would imagine you guys are shooting pretty quickly. Yeah,
and Matt is just so sharp as a director, and just has all the really detailed visuals all planned out beforehand and can show us things about how it's going to look and how the editing, the very complicated editing and voiceover work is going to fit into it. And we do a lot of things in these long, sort of sweeping one-ers, or the camera's on a dolly track or something, sweeping around the jazz club. So to answer your question, though, very quickly, we shoot a lot every day, and we got this done in like a month, I think. And it was about the same for probably like 20-something days, like maybe a little bit less than a month, because they just really go at it.
That's really fast.
Yeah.
20-something days for a whole show?
For a 6-part miniseries, yeah. Yeah.
How did they choose your character? How did they come up with your character for this particular season?
I didn't ask Matt what the inspiration was because, well, I guess we did because, what's that one Stones documentary where they're in Ireland or something? And he was like, there's a little bit of Andrew Loog Oldham in it, and, some of those, other, not that he's a Svengali, but sort of like a Svengali character who's sort of manipulating the person behind the scenes. But then when we add other elements to it with the music and the costume and everything, it sort of becomes its own thing. And there's this element of, imagining what Will Ferrell's character would do on set and having this very exaggerated, sort of incorrect vision of what a British person is like and all these invented Britishisms that he says and a name that keeps having surnames added onto it as the episodes go by.
So does that happen when you guys are doing the scenes that you're like, remember that the direction that you would be getting would be from this guy, Eric Jean Roche, so perform it this way?
It's a part of it. I think it's just... Yeah, you're just an awareness of that. And I guess coming back for a second season and having seen all of those Will Ferrell cutscenes, which were done last, they're always done, I think they're the last thing that we do. He does them in like a day. And seeing what that character was like and seeing how that all fit into the first season, it just gives us that sense of that there's that other character's spirit hanging over everything.
Now, you're working a lot right now. If you look at your IMDb, you have like 4 things that came out last year. You have like 5 things coming out this year. You promote everything that you're working on. Clearly, you're a humongously busy guy. Was this something that came from? I know you graduated college just a few years ago, right? Or maybe
yes.
Was this something
right across the street? Or
yeah,
somewhere across the street.
Was this something that when you graduated, it was kind of like, all right, time to get back, hit the ground running?
I guess so. And it's weird because going into college, I hadn't thought too specifically about what I wanted to do with my career. I knew I wanted to, it to be something I was interested in, but, just coming to college was sort of stepping away from Hollywood for a while and not going out on auditions and everything. And so when it ended, like the first thing I did was like, I went to Philadelphia and did a play, I shot an indie movie in Toronto, and it just sort of slowly built back up to, and it really was the first season of Spoils of Babylon that really started, the work schedule that I've had over the past 2 years. And it was just kind of like feeling out what's interesting. And, the fun that I had on season 1 just sort of, that got me back out to L.A. I was in L.A. for this one. And, it just sort of starts the train rolling again. So
L.A. or New York?
New York right now, yeah.
You're a bigger New York
Well,
guy?
it's tough to answer, not honestly, but like I always have a reason to be in LA. I always have to be in LA. So New York is where I want to be all the time because LA is nice, but it's rare that you get to shoot a film here. So like getting to come out here, a lot of my friends, even from Los Angeles, live out here now. So this feels like home most of the time.
When you were in school, did you turn down parts to be in stuff? Were you offered stuff and you were like, no, I'm in college now. I don't want to do that right now?
A few things, but part of what made me choose NYU is that they were really accommodating and flexible in allowing me to take semesters off to do things. So I did a play on Broadway in 2008, and then I did an indie film earlier that year. And after doing those, I was so behind in credits that I had to go to school for like 2 years straight, like through the summer and everything. So at that point, I was like, I'm not going to be auditioning for much and everything. I'm just going to get this degree done. Otherwise, I'll never get it done.
Do you find that when you were a young actor that you took acting as seriously as you take it now? Like, did you know to take it seriously then?
I guess so. I mean, I knew what the how important the stuff we were doing and how, to focus on your job and everything. But it's hard to say taking it too seriously because to do good work there has to be this sense of fun, and I think that's why potentially you can have a good performance come from someone younger, because when you're a kid, like it's all new and it's all fresh and everything. And I just as I get older, that's something for me to remember. And it's something that we studied at school. I studied experimental theater at NYU. And so much of what we, the training is like keep that sense of spontaneity and play and fun, the stuff that you have in spades as a child, that everyone has as a child, no matter what your job eventually ends up being. And that's how you find interesting work. That's how you keep from being too rigid and just trying to do it right all the time.
I would just imagine being a kid and people being like, no, you have a movie with Steven Spielberg. And I'd be like, I don't care.
No,
Whatever.
I knew who he was for sure.
You're nominated for an Oscar. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, that one is like I knew it was a big deal, but it's hard. I mean, at this age or any age, I think it's hard to really like think of it in total. And Steven actually told me the first time we met, because it was right before the Oscars. He's like the best part of that night is like pay attention to all these huge superstars who are running around like high schoolers, really excited to meet the people that they're fans of. And that was the case, is that no matter, what age or what point in your career you're at, that whole circus is just crazy.
Who came up to you? Who was the biggest person that came up to you?
There was a great moment. There was a great moment because AI was still very secret and everything. And Jude Law, who's nominated, we were nominated in the same category together, he ran over and he's like, so I heard we're going to be robots together. And I was like, yeah. So, so that was kind of cool.
What did you say? You were just like, yeah, we are.
Yeah, I know. I was shocked because I hadn't met him yet, and I hadn't seen the talented Mr. Ripley, so it was nice to meet him in person.
One thing.
I was too young. Not that I didn't want to see it.
Well, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about interviewing you is that the last couple times we've talked, you're actually just. I mean, it's not because you grew up in Hollywood, but you're a big movie buff. You're a film buff. You're a theater buff. Like, you're actually sort of a culture vulture, if you will.
Oh, nice. Thanks.
You like that one?
Thank you. Yeah, that rhymes.
What are you seeing right now? What have you been watching that has really inspired you?
What have I been watching? I was just talking about this in the car on the way over here. Is I was in London last month, and this is terrible because I should have watched this years ago. But when you go over there, Netflix does the UK version, and the In the Thick of It series, the Armando Iannucci series came up, and I was watching that with my girlfriend, and we loved that. And Peter Capaldi, who's now the Doctor on Doctor Who, I'm a big fan of. So that was pretty recent. Watching season 2 of True Detective. Which sort of inspired me too. I love watching all those people. The Colin Farrell, in particular, is a really great actor to watch. I'm curious to see where it's going. It's because the first season is really hard to. It's tough to follow something like that because the stakes are so high. So I'm interested to see where they go with it.
Incredibly high stakes. I can't.
How
imagine...
do you beat satanic ritual child murder in terms of scary stuff? I mean, at the time, my girlfriend wouldn't watch it alone. She wouldn't let me go ahead if I was working or something. She's like, "We got to watch it together" because it was really, really creepy.
I can't imagine being an actor and signing on for True Detective season 2. That the stakes would be too high. I wouldn't want to be a part of it because if it's not that good, that'd be terrifying. You'd be cast as the person who ruined True Detective.
I'm sure they were aware of all that, so I think that they know that it's only season 3, so I'm interested to see where it goes. And the direction is just so amazing. It's really because this year's Justin Lin, right? Because they set up such an amazing visual language with the first season. He's done an amazing job.
I don't think he's every episode though. I think he's doing 3 or 4.
You know what? You're right.
And then there's others. I had heard a rumor that Friedkin was doing one, which I
really
super excited about.
That would be.
I don't know if it's true though. I heard a rumor.
Wow. Yeah, I think they got some tricks up their sleeve. I'm excited to see.
Have you ever taken a job or taken something? I know that you were in the first season of this where the stakes were really high. I mean, I imagine AI was something like that where it's a Kubrick project that's going to Spielberg and everybody, just upon announcement, everybody was anticipating that movie. The stakes are really high. Did you feel that? Was that palpable for you?
That's one thing that it's been really interesting to get a sense of just as I get older. Is at the time, I knew who Stanley Kubrick was, and he had passed away tragically just a few months before we started shooting. And it's to Steven's credit that only now I hear stories from people who were working on the Warner lot at the same time, who were like, we couldn't get close to the stage, and that just all the secrecy and everything. And being in the middle of all that, it didn't feel that weird or secretive.
What do you mean? People who worked on that crew who said that?
No, on the lot. Who somebody was shooting next door, and they're like, I couldn't even walk across. The security was so tight, and all this, and no information was leaking out. And Steven does a good job of keeping that pressure off you while you're working. And you just feel it really. It's kind of weird to remember now, is that it really just felt like a normal day going to any other set and everything. It clearly wasn't, but he does a good job of insulating the actors from the high stakes and everything. And then just in terms of being a movie fan now, and having a much different relationship to and a much greater understanding of Kubrick's work now that I'm older, much greater than when I was 12 and hadn't seen a good number of Stanley's films.
12-year-old you was just a huge Clockwork Orange fan.
Yeah, it's like my favorite movie in 6th grade. But I'm just in awe of Steven because that's such a difficult project to do in terms of the expectations that people have, and that people misattributed certain parts of the story to Steven and said that he had put in stuff that wasn't there when it was a project that they'd been working on for years, and a lot of the things that would have been commonly associated with Steven, the more hopeful elements, had come from Stanley. And when he told Steven, he's like, I think this is, he had always intended for Steven to direct it. He said, I think this is closer to your sensibilities. He was referring to the Flesh Fair and some of the darker stuff that Steven had. I mean, so it was two amazing artists sort of going into roles that they, the opposite roles that they would normally be associated with. And Steven just executed it so faithfully. It's just amazing that I could have been part of that at all.
Now you're clearly talking about having worked on it. Can you go back, are you able to go back and watch these films like The Sixth Sense, like AI, and actually be able to see them for what they are? Or do you still see them as like remembering moments of being on set and things that you could have done differently? Or is it because you were a kid, you can kind of see it as someone else?
It's an interesting question, and like I don't really have a set strategy for dealing with it. I would say that I don't voluntarily go to watch my work from the past, not because I can't, it's weird for me to watch it, but it's just like once you
your
live
Netflix
through
queue is only your movies.
that would be scary. But just that in one sense, like as an actor, you want to be able to maintain the ability to know how you've done without watching it. And that's kind of a trap today where it's easier and easier when you shoot something, you can watch it immediately. You can, on Tusk, Kevin was editing it as he goes. You can go in and watch all your work cut together right after you did it. And that's really tempting. And it's cool in a lot of ways. And for some things it's useful. But I think a lot of actors also are like, I need to maintain my ability to have that third eye and to see how I've done without just watching the dailies obsessively.
Well, if you're just watching dailies obsessively, you're going to be changing your performance.
Well, it makes you self-conscious.
There might be no continuity between your performance.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a temptation that you have to resist in many ways. And then watching a finished movie like that is a form of that, I think, too.
I'm always curious. You've been working for so long. What is the best note you've ever gotten from a director? What's the worst note?
That's interesting, because on film set, like, I remember, like, the working relationship that I had with Steven and everything, it's hard to boil it down into one piece of advice. And normally, like, a great director like that isn't, giving you advice like that. It's working on very specifically on what the scene is. And I don't know. I mean, still to this day, I think the best all-encompassing advice I got was just something my dad used to say when I was younger. He was a theater actor, so he came from that tradition that I would end up studying in college. He would say that acting is believing, and that's a very simple, it's almost like, the Meisner phrase where he's like, acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances, and that's kind of what it all boils down to.
Worst? Bigger.
I've been lucky, but I've heard directors who are like, I don't know,
more
energy, yeah, faster with more intensity, yeah. But no, I've been really lucky. I've and I think that's a big reason is why I'm still doing this and why I still love it is that all my working relationships with directors are very positive, and you learn a little bit each time about how to do it. And since I did a little bit of directing in college, and it's something that I eventually want to do. Seeing somebody like, Night Shyamalan, who was, doing, I think I'm 27, I think he was like 28, 29 when he did The Sixth Sense. To be as calm as he was on that set and to be working with Bruce Willis and these big name producers in the studio, and he was just very even-keeled, a very calming presence on that set, and that's a lesson in itself. Things like that you pick up over the years is just really valuable lessons.
Right, the lesson of like, no matter what is going on back here with agents, producers, money, whatever, when I get over here, and this is where my actors and my DP are, I maintain a copacetic level.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, and the director has to be like this, and on a big film like that, on like, it's, for AI, like it's this gigantic production. We had 5 sound stages going at once, and Steven is able to compartmentalize his focus, to delegate, has an amazing crew and lots of people who he's worked with over and over again. He always is really good at finding the best people to do these things, and just to manage all of that while being able to focus on the tiny things that is right in front of him at each time. It's just amazing to watch.
How close are you to directing?
I've got a couple projects that I've been developing since college, and what's been kind of a nice reason that they haven't been made is just I've been busy doing this. All of 2013, 2014, I was pretty much on location shooting films, except for Entourage, which was done in Los Angeles. So hopefully by the end of the year, I'd like to get the ball rolling on something, because I had some stuff that I started writing in college and would like to find a home for it soon.
All right, let's take some questions. Right here in the front.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
Then nice hair.
It's really the humidity.
I
I may have made a mistake wearing a wool jacket on a day like today too.
Okay, first, I love AI. I don't know how many times I saw that movie. Then I saw you need to get Oscar because you are so fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So my question, actually, you was, like you my hero because you were so great when you were young. So my question is like David was like a Pinocchio. Then she wanted to get like a mother's love. But final, like a final scene, that's my favorite scene. Finally, mother loved David. Then she's going to die. Then you are so fantastic. You were crying. So how did you do that? Because I always thought he's a special boy, But thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
A heavily debated scene for the movie, right?
It
the
is.
final scene.
It is. And that, I think, was that whole third act in 2,000 years in the future was I think the most commonly misunderstood, because a lot of people thought they were aliens at first. And an amazing moment for me was going to see the Kubrick exhibit at LACMA, where he had some artist in like the Canary Islands do these sketches of what he wanted parts of AI to look like. And it looked exactly what Steven did. It was sketches from like 1989 or something, and it was like that was the vision the whole way through. But anyway, I remember reading that script at like 12, and The Sixth Sense is pretty heavy, but this one is like about the death of all humanity in a sense. So I remember at 12 being like, man, like it being one of the first times of really. These are the sort of things, like you read that book or you see that movie that makes you think about things for the first time. That was the first time I'd ever thought about things on that epic scale. And it was heavy in a good way, a way that makes you grow. And so there's sometimes as an actor where for a crying scene or a laughing scene or things where to get an emotional response, you have to, reach into some memory or something to get it. And then there's times where the material, and both The Sixth Sense and AI were really like this, material is so strong and so, you can connect to it so easily that that's kind of all you need. And there are scenes that you look at where you're like, oh, that's going to be a tough one, like crying a lot or having this happen or getting that mad or something. And you don't know, you're a little bit apprehensive going onto the set. And then once you get in the moment, you're really working with another actor in a really connected way, it just kind of happens. And AI, that happened all the time, so.
How old were you when you read the script for The Sixth Sense?
10.
Did you know about death? I mean, children know that things die at a pretty young age, but they don't really know that much about death and what it means. Did The Sixth Sense teach you as a 10-year-old sort of what death was?
I wouldn't say that it taught me. I'd say by that age, you've had some relatives pass away, and you have maybe you don't fully understand it or what it's like to experience a death of someone really close to you. But it was kind of like Louis C.K. says, where he's like, a pet dying is like a good rehearsal for the parents. Where he's like, if your dog dies, you could be like, all right, yeah, we go through it and everything.
It's good rehearsal.
Now,
for
when a person
The Sixth
dies,
Sense.
remember Fido? It was like that. So I think we'd had like some pets die and things like that. And then like I was aware of people, I think it had a couple. I can't remember by that point, but there are people that I had known who had died. So it wasn't a new concept. But The Sixth Sense was. The genius of that script was that you're dealing with it in such an intimate way, and that he made it more about almost that like not being able to communicate with someone close to you is scarier than death itself. Death is one thing, but to have this block between you and the people you love is really where I think he got a lot of the real horror from.
Absolutely. Do we have any more questions right here?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I'm sure you're very familiar with the fact that you've been blessed your whole career with working with such top-tier directors and writers. So I guess the question I have, being that you're a film buff, is there like somebody, a director or a young director that you have your eye on that you'd like to work with next?
Oh man, there's so many out there. I would just say that one person who has been a favorite director of mine for a long time. I just think everything that Paul Thomas Anderson does is like a top favorite movie of mine. Just and all of them are so different from one another. I'm just a huge fan of his. So I wouldn't say
last time you were here and I had an interview with you, you told me that you were either going to see or you had just seen There Will Be Blood with a live orchestra.
That's right.
Yeah,
that was like the day we spoke. Yeah, that they had this. I love events like this. I wish, that this is what's great about New York is they do things like this, is that the United Palace Theater up in Harlem, this beautiful gold leaf ceiling and everything, they showed There Will Be Blood. And then they did, I'm a big Radiohead fan too, so I really freaked out when Johnny Greenwood scored that movie back in 2007. They had a live orchestra do all the music from the movie, and it was
I remember
really
you
crazy.
told me that, and I was so fucking jealous of you. I was so mad. I was like, oh, I knew about that, and I didn't buy tickets. I hate myself.
Oh, yeah.
That is probably top 3 movies for me. That's easily one of my favorite movies of all time.
It's just amazing.
If you put There Will Be Blood on in front of me, I will sit down and I will watch it.
Yeah, and then because for me, he said he watched The Treasure of Sierra Madre every night when he was writing it. Oftentimes it'll be like 4 hours gone. If I'm like, oh, I should watch that. Oh, I could watch that too after as a double feature.
You'll finish There Will Be Blood. You'll be like, I'm gonna watch Madre
I still want a little more. I'm not just gonna watch this again. But a cool bit of movie trivia is when they blew, have the well explosion and then the big fire. They were shooting another great movie from that year, No Country for Old Men, right over the hill.
Marfa,
and I don't
Texas,
think they were
right?
too aware of each other's presence, and it ruined a day of shooting for No Country for Old Men because there's this giant cloud of black smoke coming over the hill. So that was a pretty awesome county to be in for making movies at the time.
Did you ever hear the story of David Carr that year when he was the carpetbagger for the New York Times, and he met Paul Thomas Anderson in a bar, and he had written that No Country was a better movie than There Will Be Blood? Wow. And Paul Thomas Anderson pulled David Carr over, may he rest in peace, one of the greatest media editors of all time. Paul Thomas Anderson pulled him over and said, you really think that movie's better than mine? You don't know shit about movies, man. And sent him on his way.
Are you kidding? I never heard that. Wow. That's so hardcore.
Do we have any more questions? Right here.
Okay, so coming from being a child actor to now being a man, do you feel that you would like to establish your identity as someone different for audiences and directors alike? Because if you're starting at 10, each year that you're growing up, you're developing just as a human being. So now that most people start as an adult being a child actor, how are you trying to portray yourself today? And do you feel that you're trying to get back to that place in your skill where you were at 10? Because as actors, we're always having to go back to our childhood. Or are you trying to do it from a different standpoint because you're no longer a child? You're an adult and you have to use your mental in a different way than you used your heart as a kid. So
absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. And that is a fascinating process just of getting older in general and then how to relate to that with your craft. And I think what's been fun for me is that because I went to college and because I wasn't in a lot of films for a couple years, there's almost like this, I was working on acting the whole time, but in terms of what the audience has seen, there was this gap between being really young and then coming back now and doing these sort of things. And it's just fun to be doing things that are unexpected. And it's not so much as if I want to establish a new identity or one identity, but just to try and keep pushing forward and for each thing to be a kind of a surprise. I mean, the actors that I've looked up to for a really long time, people like Gary Oldman and Philip Seymour Hoffman, another guy, rest in peace. People who just transform themselves with every role, and it's hard to. I mean, we're familiar with who those people are, but to really nail down one central thing about them as actors, they just were constantly pushing themselves to do different things, and that's a real inspiration for me. I'd say that's the sort of work that I'd like to do. And just on your point about the difference between your brain and your heart is that when you are a kid, it is easier to just sort of go from that. You haven't learned all the ways of the world and all of the honestly, the defense mechanisms that you need to survive as an adult. And that's what's fun about acting is that it helps you kind of, in order to do really honest work, oftentimes you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and to strip away those sort of things that you've learned over the years. And it's challenging, but it's a necessary part of what we do.
A lot of it's embarrassment defenses, right? I mean, as a
Oh,
little
totally.
kid, I mean,
Yeah.
but then as an adult, you know, you're putting the camera there, you're asking me to do this. I don't know how that's going to read. This is going to be on a screen.
What's the stat that they say, or not stat, but the thing that the little factoid that you hear all the time where it's like public speaking is a bigger fear in polls than death. It's like number 1, public speaking, number 2, death. It's like, yeah, fear of embarrassment is a very, very, very strong instinct. So yeah, being able to embarrass yourself or to make a mistake or to totally fall on your face, that's something that you have to try and keep yourself okay with. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have any more questions?
We have time for one more question.
Okay, let's hear it.
Hey, man.
Hi.
So with the name of the show being Spoils Before Dying, do you still see dead people?
Not so much, you know. I apparently there were a lot of ghosts in this one, and I missed them. Like my character didn't have the skill.
My actual question was, with the note from Tom Hanks being your cinema dad, do you have any like current mentors that you have personal relationships with for guidance like throughout your career?
I am really lucky to, you know, have a really close relationship with my parents and my dad, who is an actor. You know, has always been the most influential person on how I learned acting when I was younger. So it's great having a relationship with him. And then when I went to school, I had, you know, some really amazing professors. I would have to name like a dozen names to give everybody their fair share, because I just met such a wide variety of people with very differing philosophies about the different, you know, things that you're going on stage to do or going on film to do. So yeah, the community of artists that I met here when I went to college, people my age too that I went to school with, having people like that whose opinion you respect and whose work you admire just really keeps you, I think, in a good zone. So
absolutely. I think that's all we have time for, guys. Haley, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.